The Carter family lived in a picture-perfect neighborhood, the kind with well-manicured lawns, white picket fences, and neighbors who greeted each other with friendly waves. Their two-story colonial house sat at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac where Derek Carter and Lauren Carter seemed to embody suburban bliss. To outsiders, they were the ideal family. Derek, the charming and successful marketing executive, Lauren, the doting stay-at-home mother, and their two children, 6-year-old Ethan and 3-year-old Ava, who brought life and laughter to their home. But perfection, as they say, is often an illusion. Derek, 35, was a man of confidence and charisma. His sharp suits, easy smile, and ability to charm clients had earned him a stellar reputation in his field. But behind closed doors, his easy charm was starting to wear thin. Lauren, 33, had devoted herself entirely to raising their children and managing their home. But she couldn't ignore the growing distance between her and Derek. The late nights, the missed dinners, the lack of communication, all of it chipped away at the foundation of their marriage. Lauren had tried to convince herself it was just a phase. After all, they had been married for nearly a decade, and raising two young children was no easy feat. Yet the small gestures that once defined their love, Derek surprising her with flowers, Lauren slipping love notes into his briefcase, were long gone. Their conversations had dwindled to logistical updates about the kids, and the warmth they once shared had been replaced by a cool, polite detachment. Still, Lauren soldiered on. She poured her energy into creating a stable and happy home for Ethan and Ava. From volunteering at Ethan's school to planning playdates for Ava, she immersed herself in motherhood. But there were moments, late at night when the house was quiet, that she couldn't ignore the emptiness she felt. She would sit on the couch with a cup of tea, staring at the framed family photo on the mantel and wondering where things had gone wrong. It was during one of these moments that Lauren decided to hire help. With Derek working long hours and her days consumed by the kids, she realized she needed someone to lend a hand. That's when Kayla entered their lives. Kayla Simmons was a 22-year-old college student studying early childhood education. She had been recommended by a neighbor who raved about her energy and reliability. When Lauren interviewed Kayla, she was immediately struck by her enthusiasm and easy rapport with the children. Kayla had medium brown skin, warm brown eyes, and a bright smile that made her seem approachable and trustworthy. "Hi, Ethan. Hi, Ava," Kayla said, kneeling to their level with an animated wave. Ethan giggled shyly while Ava clung to Lauren's leg before finally warming up to Kayla. Within minutes, Kayla had them both laughing as she played an impromptu game of peekaboo with Ava and listened intently to Ethan talk about his favorite superheroes. Lauren smiled, relieved. "You're a natural," she said. "I think you'll be a great fit." From that day on, Kayla became a regular presence in the Carter household. She would arrive in the afternoons to help with the kids, staying late on evenings when Derek and Lauren had events or commitments. The children adored her, and Lauren appreciated the break Kayla provided, using the time to catch up on errands or enjoy a rare moment of peace. Derek, too, noticed Kayla's presence, but for very different reasons. At first, it was innocent enough. He would exchange pleasantries with her when he came home from work, occasionally joining in when she played with the kids. But over time, he found himself lingering in the room a little longer than necessary, watching her with a growing interest. It wasn't just Kayla's youth or beauty that caught Derek's attention. It was her energy, her ability to laugh easily, and the way she seemed to light up a room. She was a stark contrast to Lauren, who often seemed tired and preoccupied. Derek began to wonder if he had been unfairly stuck in a marriage that no longer fulfilled him. One evening, while Lauren was upstairs putting Ava to bed, Derek and Kayla found themselves alone in the kitchen. Kayla was washing dishes, and Derek leaned against the counter, sipping a beer. "You've been great with the kids," Derek said, his tone casual but warm. "They can't stop talking about you." Kayla smiled over her shoulder. "Thanks, they're great kids. I love spending time with them." There was a pause, the kind that lingered just a beat too long. Derek cleared his throat, setting his beer down. If there's ever anything you need, more hours, a raise, just let me know. I appreciate everything you do for this family. Kayla turned to face him, her smile softening. That means a lot. Thank you, Mr. Carter. Call me Derek, he said, his voice lowering slightly. The way he looked at her in that moment, intense and lingering, made Kayla's cheeks flush. She quickly turned back to the sink, unsure how to respond. From that night on, the dynamic between Derek and Kayla began to shift. Their conversations became more frequent, filled with subtle compliments and fleeting glances. Derek started coming home earlier, using excuses to check in on the kids, but secretly hoping to see Kayla. And Kayla, flattered by the attention of an older, successful man, began to look forward to their interactions. Lauren, oblivious to the growing tension, continued to see Kayla as a blessing in their lives. She trusted her implicitly, grateful for the way Kayla had bonded with her children. She didn't notice the way Derek's demeanor softened when Kayla was around, or the way Kayla's laughter seemed just a little too loud when Derek made a joke. But in the quiet corners of the Carter household, something forbidden was beginning to take root. A spark had been lit, and it was only a matter of time before it grew into a flame, one that would threaten to consume everything in its path. Kayla's role in the Carter household grew steadily over the weeks. She became more than just the babysitter. She was a source of energy and warmth that the children adored, and Lauren relied on. But for Derek, her presence had become a dangerous temptation, one he could no longer resist. It started innocently enough. Derek would find excuses to linger around when Kayla was at the house. A simple conversation about the Children's Day would turn into light-hearted banter, and soon into subtle flirtation. Kayla, flattered by his attention, played along, convincing herself it was harmless. After all, Derek was her employer. Nothing could possibly happen, or so she thought. The first turning point came on an unassuming Thursday evening. Lauren had taken the kids to her sister's house for a few hours, giving Derek some rare time alone. When Kayla arrived at the house to pick up a book she had forgotten, she found Derek in the kitchen, preparing a late dinner. "You're cooking?" Kayla asked with a teasing smile as she stepped into the kitchen. "Didn't peg you for the chef type." Derek chuckled, glancing up from the cutting board. "Gotta eat something, right? Lauren's out with the kids, so I'm left to fend for myself." Kayla leaned against the counter, her curiosity piqued. "What's on the menu?" "Just some pasta," Derek said, gesturing toward a pot of boiling water. "Want some?" "There's plenty." Kayla hesitated, but eventually nodded. "Sure, why not? I haven't had dinner yet." What began as an innocent offer soon became something more. They sat across from each other at the kitchen table, sharing laughs and stories. Derek talked about his college days, his career struggles, and the pressures of balancing work and family. Kayla opened up about her dreams of becoming a teacher and her struggles with juggling school and work. For a moment, it felt like the rest of the world didn't exist. The conversation flowed easily, the laughter coming naturally. But as the night wore on, the air between them grew heavier. Derek's compliments became more personal, about her smile, her energy, the way she lit up a room. Kayla felt a warmth rise in her cheeks, unsure whether to deflect or lean into the moment. It was Derek who made the first move. As Kayla stood to leave, thanking him for the meal, he stepped closer, his hand brushing hers as she reached for her bag. "Kayla," he said, his voice low. "You're really something, you know that?" Kayla froze, her heart pounding. "Derek, Before she could finish, he leaned in and kissed her. It was tentative at first, as if testing the waters, but when Kayla didn't pull away, it deepened. For a brief moment, the kiss was all-consuming, a forbidden act that felt both thrilling and terrifying. When they finally pulled apart, Kayla looked at him, her mind racing. "I should go," she said, grabbing her bag and heading for the door. Derek didn't stop her, but the look in his eyes made it clear this wasn't the end. In the days that followed, both Derek and Kayla wrestled with what had happened. Derek told himself it was a mistake, a one-time lapse in judgment, but he couldn't stop thinking about her. Kayla, on the other hand, was filled with a mix of guilt and exhilaration. She knew what they had done was wrong, but she couldn't deny the excitement she felt in Derek's presence. Their interactions became charged with tension. Every time Kayla came over, their conversations were laced with unspoken words, their glances lingering just a little too long. The lines between employer and employee blurred further with each passing day. The affair truly began one night when Lauren had gone to visit her mother with the kids, leaving Derek alone at home. Kayla had stayed late to help clean up after a long day. As she was getting ready to leave, Derek approached her, his expression conflicted but determined. "This thing between us," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I can't stop thinking about you, Kayla." Kayla looked at him, her resolve weakening. "Derek, we can't." "I know," he said, stepping closer, "but I can't help it." And just like that, the dam broke. Their affair, once confined to fleeting glances and stolen moments, escalated into something far more dangerous. They met in secret, taking advantage of Lauren's trust and Derek's frequent work meetings. They convinced themselves that what they were doing wasn't entirely wrong, that they had found something special, something worth the risk. Lauren, however, began to notice the cracks. At first, it was small things. Derek's sudden interest in going to the gym, the way he checked his phone more often and guarded it closely. He started staying later at work, his excuses growing more elaborate with each passing week. Lauren chalked it up to the usual stresses of life, but a nagging feeling in her gut told her something was off. One evening, as Lauren folded laundry in the living room, Derek sat across from her, typing away on his laptop. His phone buzzed on the table between them, and Lauren glanced at it instinctively. The name Kayla flashed on the screen, accompanied by a short message. "Still thinking about earlier?" Lauren's hands froze mid-fold, her heart pounding. She quickly averted her gaze, pretending she hadn't seen anything, but her mind raced with questions. Why was Kayla texting Derek? And why was the message so intimate? Deciding not to jump to conclusions, Lauren observed silently. She noticed the way Derek seemed to light up whenever Kayla was around, the way his conversations with her were just a little too friendly. The puzzle pieces were beginning to fall into place, and Lauren didn't like the picture they were forming. But instead of confronting Derek right away, Lauren decided to wait. She wanted to be sure. And as her suspicions grew, so did her quiet determination to uncover the truth. What Derek and Kayla didn't realize was that the house of cards they had built was teetering dangerously close to collapse. And when it fell, it would bring everything down with it. Lauren couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something wasn't right. Derek had always been charming, even flirtatious by nature, but his recent behavior felt different, calculated, secretive. The text from Kayla had planted a seed of doubt in her mind, and that doubt was quickly growing into suspicion. Over the next few days, Lauren began to observe Derek more closely. She noticed how he always kept his phone within arm's reach, the way he quickly closed his laptop whenever she entered the room, and the unusually long showers he took after work. The connection between Derek and Kayla became harder to ignore, especially when Lauren caught him smiling at his phone, a smile she hadn't seen him give her in years. Determined to get to the bottom of things, Lauren devised a plan. One evening, when Derek came home late claiming to have had a work meeting, Lauren decided to check his phone while he showered. Her hands trembled as she unlocked it, half hoping she wouldn't find anything incriminating. But what she found shattered her. The messages were undeniable. Conversations between Derek and Kayla were filled with flirty exchanges, plans to meet in secret, and references to moments they had shared. Lauren's heart raced as she read them, her disbelief giving way to a surge of anger. She scrolled through photos Derek had saved, nothing explicit but enough to confirm the nature of their relationship. Lauren's stomach churned as she realized the extent of their betrayal. The man she had built her life with, the father of her children, was having an affair with the young woman she had trusted in her home. The devastation was overwhelming, but as she sat on the edge of their bed clutching Derek's phone, her tears dried. In their place was a cold, simmering rage. When Derek emerged from the shower, Lauren was sitting in the living room, her expression unreadable. He hesitated at the doorway, sensing something was off. "How was your meeting?" Lauren asked, her voice calm but tinged with a sharpness that made Derek pause. "It was fine," he said, avoiding her gaze. "Why?" Lauren stood, holding his phone up. "Then maybe you can explain these." Derek's face drained of color as he saw the screen in her hand, the incriminating messages staring back at him. "Lauren, I can explain." "Don't," she snapped, her voice rising. "Don't you dare try to lie to me. I trusted you, Derek. I trusted you with our family, with our life. And this is what you've been doing behind my back?" Derek stumbled over his words, searching for a way to defuse the situation. It wasn't serious, Lauren. It didn't mean anything." "Didn't mean anything?" Lauren repeated, her voice breaking. "You've been sneaking around with her, lying to me, lying to our kids, and you expect me to believe it didn't mean anything?" "It's not what you think," Derek insisted, stepping toward her. "I love you, Lauren, I do. I made a mistake." Lauren laughed bitterly, shaking her head. "A mistake? You call months of lying and sneaking around a mistake? How dare you?" Derek tried to reach for her, but she pulled away, her glare cutting through him like a knife. "Don't touch me," she hissed. "You've already done enough." The confrontation left Derek shaken, but Lauren's reaction was not what he expected. Instead of screaming or packing her bags, she seemed unnervingly calm. She returned his phone without another word and walked upstairs to their bedroom, closing the door behind her. Over the next few days, Lauren maintained her composure, but inside she was seething. She refused to let Derek see how deeply he had hurt her, instead playing the role of the composed wife. She still cooked dinner, took the kids to school, and even made polite small talk with Derek when necessary. But behind closed doors, she was plotting. Lauren knew confronting Kayla directly wouldn't solve anything. The young woman had betrayed her trust, but Derek was the one who had made vows to her. Still, Lauren couldn't bear the thought of Kayla continuing to walk into her home as if nothing had happened. The mere sight of her filled Lauren with a mix of disgust and fury. Her opportunity came one afternoon when Kayla arrived to babysit. Lauren had decided to stay home, claiming she wasn't feeling well. As Kayla played with Ethan and Ava in the living room, Lauren sat at the kitchen table, her eyes fixed on the babysitter. "Kayla!" Lauren called out, her voice cutting through the cheerful sounds of the children's laughter. Kayla looked up, surprised. "Yes, Mrs. Carter? Can I have a word with you in the kitchen?" Lauren's tone was pleasant, but there was an edge to it that made Kayla hesitate. Kayla followed Lauren into the kitchen, her cheerful demeanor replaced by nervousness. Lauren gestured for her to sit, her expression calm but unreadable. "Kayla," Lauren began, her voice measured. "You've been with us for a while now, and the kids adore you. I appreciate everything you've done for them." Kayla smiled nervously. "Thank you. I love spending time with them." Lauren leaned forward slightly, her gaze piercing. "But I need to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with me. Have you and Derek been involved?" The color drained from Kayla's face. "What? No, of course not. I would never—" "Don't lie to me," Lauren interrupted, her voice firm. "I've seen the messages. I know what's been going on." Kayla's mouth opened and closed as she struggled to find words. I'm so sorry, Mrs. Carter. I didn't mean for it to happen." Lauren held up a hand, silencing her. "Spare me the excuses. I trusted you, Kayla. I brought you into my home, into my family. And this is how you repay me." Kayla looked down, tears pooling in her eyes. "It was a mistake. I didn't mean to hurt you." Lauren's expression hardened. "A mistake? You don't accidentally have an affair with a married man. You made a choice, Kayla. Both of you did." Kayla nodded, unable to meet Lauren's gaze. "I'll quit. I'll leave. You won't have to see me again." Lauren stared at her for a long moment before speaking. "I think that's for the best." As Kayla gathered her things and left the house, Lauren felt no sense of relief. Her anger had not subsided, and the betrayal still burned. Confronting Kayla was only the beginning. Derek was the real target of her wrath, and she was determined to make him pay for what he had done. Lauren watched through the window as Kayla drove away, her mind racing with possibilities. She had been blindsided by Derek's betrayal, but she wouldn't let him win. Not this time, not ever. What Derek didn't realize was that the storm was just beginning, and Lauren was ready to unleash it. Lauren couldn't sleep that night. Her mind churned with a toxic mix of rage and betrayal, replaying Derek's lies and Kayla's tearful apology over and over. Every smile Derek had faked, every tender moment he had shared with Kayla in secret, fueled her resolve. She had been the perfect wife, sacrificing her dreams to raise their children and build a life with him. And this was how he repaid her? But Lauren wasn't the type to crumble. Beneath her calm exterior, a fire burned, and she was ready to take back control. Derek had torn apart the life they'd built, and Lauren would make sure he paid for it. The next morning, Lauren played her role flawlessly. She smiled at Derek over breakfast, packed Ethan and Ava's lunches, and kissed them goodbye as they left for school. Derek, visibly relieved by Lauren's sudden shift in attitude, assumed the worst was behind them. He even tried to rekindle their connection, brushing her shoulder as he passed her in the kitchen and making light-hearted conversation. "I was thinking we could plan a weekend getaway," Derek said, leaning against the counter with his coffee mug. "Just the two of us. You know, to reconnect." Lauren gave him a soft smile. "That sounds nice," she said, her voice sweet but distant. "We'll talk about it tonight." Derek nodded, pleased with her response before heading to work. What he didn't know was that Lauren had no intention of patching things up. She had already begun to put her plan into motion. Over the next few days, Lauren meticulously gathered evidence. She searched Derek's phone while he slept, screenshotting incriminating messages and forwarding them to herself. She found receipts for gifts he had bought Kayla, restaurant bills from their clandestine meetings, and photos he had saved of her. Every detail added to her arsenal, and Lauren made sure to document it all. But Lauren wasn't content with simply exposing Derek's affair. She wanted him to feel the same pain and humiliation he had inflicted on her, and she wanted to ensure that Kayla, the young woman who had betrayed her trust, wouldn't walk away unscathed either. Lauren invited Kayla to the house one last time under the guise of needing her help with the kids. She planned the evening carefully, ensuring Derek would be home as well. Kayla hesitated at first, sensing that something was off, but Lauren reassured her with a warm tone. "It'll be just like old times," Lauren said over the phone. "The kids have been asking for you, and I could really use the help." Kayla reluctantly agreed, unaware of what awaited her. That evening, the house was unnervingly quiet. Lauren had sent the kids to her sister's for the night, leaving just herself, Derek, and Kayla. When Kayla arrived, Lauren greeted her with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Thanks for coming, Kayla," Lauren said, ushering her inside. "Derek's in the living room. Why don't you join him while I finish up in the kitchen?" Kayla nodded, setting down her bag and heading into the living room. Derek looked up, surprised to see her. His expression quickly shifted to panic as his eyes darted toward the kitchen, where Lauren's footsteps echoed faintly. "What are you doing here?" Derek whispered, his voice tense. "Lauren asked me to come," Kayla said, confused. "She said she needed help with the kids." Derek's jaw tightened. He could feel the noose tightening around him, but he didn't dare confront Lauren yet. Instead, he sat stiffly on the couch, trying to appear calm as Kayla took a seat across from him. Moments later, Lauren entered the room, carrying a tray of coffee cups. She placed it on the table, her movements deliberate and precise, before sitting down next to Derek. The tension in the room was palpable as she looked between the two of them, her expression unreadable. "I thought it was time we had a little chat," Lauren began, her voice calm but laced with steel. "The three of us." Derek's face paled. "Lauren, what is this?" "Quiet," she snapped, her eyes locking onto his. "You've had plenty of time to talk. Now it's my turn." Kayla fidgeted uncomfortably, glancing at the door as if planning her escape. But Lauren's voice held her in place. "Kayla," Lauren said, her tone deceptively kind, "I trusted you. I let you into my home, into my family. And this is how you repay me? I'm sorry, Kayla stammered, tears welling up in her eyes. I never meant for this to happen. Stop, Lauren interrupted, her voice sharp. You knew exactly what you were doing, both of you did. She turned to Derek, her eyes blazing with fury. And you stood there and lied to my face, night after night. You made me believe we still had something worth saving. Derek tried to defend himself, but Lauren's glare silenced him. She reached into her bag and pulled out a folder, throwing it onto the table. Go ahead, take a look, she said coldly. Inside the folder were the screenshots, photos, and receipts she had collected. Kayla's face turned ashen as she realized the extent of Lauren's knowledge. Derek's hands trembled as he flipped through the evidence, his silence damning. Do you have anything to say for yourself? Lauren asked, her voice dangerously calm. Derek looked up, his expression a mix of guilt and desperation. Lauren, Save it, she said, standing abruptly. I've heard enough. The room descended into chaos as Lauren's calm facade finally cracked. She began yelling, her voice filled with years of pent-up frustration and anger. Derek and Kayla tried to reason with her, but she was beyond listening. In her eyes, they were both guilty and they both deserved to pay. The confrontation escalated, the tension boiling over until it could no longer be contained. And then, in a moment of blinding rage, everything changed. When the dust settled, the once perfect Carter household was in ruins. Lauren stood frozen, her hands trembling as she stared at the aftermath of her actions. Derek lay motionless on the floor, his face pale and lifeless. Kayla sat slumped against the couch, her face streaked with tears, her body shaking uncontrollably. The silence was deafening. Lauren's chest heaved as she struggled to process what she had done. The rage that had consumed her moments earlier was replaced by a cold, hollow emptiness. She glanced at the clock on the wall, its ticking suddenly unbearably loud. Time was running out, and Lauren knew she had to act quickly. She couldn't undo what had happened, but she could still control the narrative. The stillness of the Carter household was shattered by the sound of sirens blaring in the distance. Lauren stood in the middle of the living room, her hands trembling and her breath coming in shallow gasps. The scene around her was one of utter devastation. Derek's lifeless body lay sprawled on the floor, blood pooling beneath him, while Kayla sat slumped against the couch, sobbing uncontrollably, her face pale and streaked with tears. Lauren's mind raced as she tried to piece together what had just happened. The confrontation had escalated so quickly, yelling, accusations, and then violence. It wasn't supposed to end like this, but now there was no turning back. She knew the police would arrive any minute, and she had to decide what story to tell. When the officers arrived, the scene they walked into was grim. Lauren greeted them at the door, her face pale but composed. She led them into the living room where Derek's body lay. Kayla, still in shock, could barely speak as the officers questioned her. Lauren, on the other hand, had already prepared her narrative. It was an accident, she told them, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside. Derek and I were arguing and Kayla tried to intervene. Things got out of hand and he fell. I didn't mean for this to happen. The officers listened carefully, taking notes and surveying the scene. Lauren's calm demeanor and tearful recounting of events seemed convincing, but the inconsistencies in her story didn't go unnoticed. The blood spatter on the walls, the bruises on Kayla's wrists, these details suggested that this was no simple accident. As the investigation unfolded, the truth began to unravel. Kayla, under pressure from the authorities, eventually broke down and revealed the affair. She admitted to the heated argument that had taken place and how Lauren had confronted both of them with the evidence she had collected. But what happened next was harder to piece together. According to Kayla, Lauren had flown into a rage, accusing Derek of ruining their family and betraying her. Derek had tried to calm her down, but when he reached out to her, she grabbed the nearest object, a heavy glass paperweight from the coffee table, and struck him in a moment of blind fury. Kayla insisted she had tried to stop Lauren, but the damage was already done. Lauren, however, stuck to her version of events, claiming it was all an accident. She portrayed herself as a heartbroken wife pushed to the brink by her husband's infidelity and Kayla's betrayal. But the evidence against her continued to mount. The trial became a media sensation, with the Carter family's once perfect facade now the center of a scandal that captivated the public. Journalists dubbed it the Babysitter affair, and every detail of Lauren's life was dissected in the headlines. The courtroom was packed with spectators as Lauren faced charges of manslaughter, while Kayla testified as a key witness for the prosecution. The prosecution painted Lauren as a woman consumed by rage and jealousy, driven to commit a crime of passion. They presented the evidence: the bruises on Kayla's arms, the paperweight covered in Derek's blood, and the text messages Lauren had collected as part of her plan. They argued that Lauren's actions were premeditated, that she had invited Kayla to the house knowing full well what she intended to do. The defense, however, portrayed Lauren as a victim of circumstance, a devoted wife and mother pushed beyond her breaking point by her husband's betrayal. They argued that her actions were not premeditated, but the result of an emotional outburst, a momentary lapse in judgment. In the end, the jury found Lauren guilty of voluntary manslaughter. She was sentenced to 15 years in prison, a punishment that felt both too harsh and not harsh enough, depending on who you asked. Kayla, though spared legal consequences, faced public scorn and ostracism. She dropped out of college and moved away, hoping to start fresh, but the stigma of her involvement in the affair and its tragic consequences followed her wherever she went. Back in the quiet suburb where the Carter family once lived, the house stood empty, a grim reminder of the tragedy that had unfolded within its walls. Neighbors whispered about the family that seemed so perfect from the outside, now reduced to a cautionary tale about betrayal and its deadly repercussions. Ethan and Ava, too young to understand the full scope of what had happened, were sent to live with Lauren's sister. They would grow up with only fragments of memories of their parents, haunted by questions they might never have answers to. In her prison cell, Lauren spent her days reflecting on the choices that had led her there. The anger that once burned so brightly had been replaced by a dull ache, a mixture of regret, grief, and emptiness. She replayed the events of that fateful night over and over, wondering if there was a moment when she could have turned back, when she could have stopped herself. But there was no going back now. The life she had built, the family she had loved, was gone forever, and in the silence of her cell, Lauren was left to grapple with the consequences of her actions, a reminder that even the smallest cracks in a foundation can bring down an entire house.